So welcome everyone to this webinar brought to you by Decide Solutions. We're going to be talking about why SOLIDWORKS today, and I'm going to show some efficiency and ease of use stuff, and I'm going to be utilizing kind of a story to illustrate this example that I'm calling A Journey to Model Mania at SOLIDWORKS World 2018. I'm Jared Spaniel. I'm an applications engineer with Decide Solutions out of Fresno, California. So a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to show some efficiency comparisons within SOLIDWORKS and how to access some of these tools and items. We're going to talk a little bit about what Model Mania is so I can kind of give you that context of the story. I'm going to discuss a little bit of the user interface, some ways you can access commands quickly. I'm going to review some key takeaways, things I really want you to take from this presentation, and then I'm going to give you an action and a challenge for what you can do to help improve your own personal modeling efficiency. So my goal here is to give you, the user, some options and ways to speed up your modeling process and or access to commands, therefore increasing your efficiency. My goal here is not to show you how to model, but how to go about modeling more efficiently. Now, if you pick up a few modeling tricks along the way based on what I'm showing, that's great too, right? So efficiency. How to be efficient in SOLIDWORKS can be a daunting task, right? There are a wide variety of ways to go about workflows, commands, customizing, and ways to get all these things accomplished. There are typically at least 3 ways to access a command in SOLIDWORKS, if not many more. Things can be accessed from the command manager, the drop-down menus, mouse gestures, shortcut keys, right mouse button clicks, the search bar, just to name a few. The key here is to find out what works best for you and what you will stay with consistently. Think about how you'd like to access the commands you use the most and what commands those are. How do you model? For example, do you just use the mouse or do you use the keyboard a lot too for finding things? Or a combination of both? If you have an advanced mouse like a space mouse, then you have other shortcut keys built into your mouse, and that is another technique to consider as well. That could make you even faster. All these factors will dictate how you should customize your user interface. I prefer to access commands through either the right mouse button, the breadcrumbs, or the S key for the shortcuts. I drag and drop commands onto the S key customization for what I use most frequently. If it's something I don't use frequently, I'll use the search bar to search it rather than looking through drop-down menus. So simply comparing the amount of travel is another way to illustrate the relative streamlining of SOLIDWORKS 2016 and above, the user interface, versus 2015. The main thing that made this improvement in mouse travel was the introduction of breadcrumbs in SOLIDWORKS 2016. This allowed the user to access the commands and shortcuts at the mouse pointer, opposed to having to move back to the feature tree to click and edit features. You can see that in the images shown here, comparing the image on the left without breadcrumbs to the image on the right with breadcrumbs, a significantly less amount of travel going back to the feature tree. So what does that mean to you? These interface improvements mean less time traveling away from your design in the viewport window to edit and more time actually modeling. So let's set the stage and talk a bit about this example I'm going to show and what Model Mania is, just to give you some background if you're not familiar with this. Model Mania is a speed modeling contest held every year at SOLIDWORKS World. You're provided a 2D drawing with some dimensions to model a 3D part. There are 3 phases. Phase 1, model a part. Phase 2, make a change to that part and hope your model stays together. Phase 3, perform a simple simulation on the model. Get an output of usually a factor of safety, and that is your answer. You will have a specific time to complete this challenge. This year it was 20 minutes. Once the time ends, you're done, and the results are automatically submitted. Or if you finish early, which is the goal, then you would submit your answer. And of course, the fastest time with the correct answer wins. So this is this year's 2018 challenge model. Phase 1 of the model is shown here. It looks like a relatively simple part, but it is quite challenging. You may even model some very complex parts, but you likely have an essentially unlimited amount of time in the respect that you're not being timed on your modeling speed every day, right? So phase 2 is shown here. This is the change to the existing geometry. In this case, a shell of the sides of the clamp and a change to the cylinder boss height, along with some additional fillets. Phase 3 is to perform a simple simulation on the part, get some results. Usually a factor of safety is the final answer, which will be used to determine if you've done the modeling correctly. The simulation portion is very quick, and usually utilizing Simulation Express for this is the best option due to the simplicity. Now let's take a look at one way to go about modeling this and some of the shortcuts that you might want to look for. Keep in mind that I'm not intending this to be a how to model tutorial, but I want to use this example as a method to show some shortcuts and efficiency techniques. There are of course many other ways to get this model done besides the method that I'm going to show. So I have a new part started here. I'm going to simply create a sketch on my front plane, right? I'm going to select an axis tool, and I'm going to utilize the shortcut key. Now a few ways to do this are you can select a line and then convert it to construction geometry, or you can grab a center line. It's all about how many clicks that you take to do these things, right? I'm going to utilize the escape key very quickly to back out of that command, but remain in my sketch. I'm going to utilize the S key once again to draw a few circles here. Once I have those circles drawn, I'm going to grab a line tool with the S key once again. Now keep in mind that you could use mouse gestures or any other methods that you like to access these commands. I typically think that the S key and the mouse gestures are probably the fastest way because they keep you in the viewport window and you don't have to go up to the command manager or the drop downs. Now as I'm modeling, of course I'm sure you all know that you want to make sure that you pick up the constraints as you model, right? You don't want to have to go back and reestablish these after the fact because that takes a significant amount of time, and when you're on a time crunch, that's a pretty big deal, right? So I'm picking up the constraints here. As I draw these lines, I want to make sure that I'm grabbing some tangent relationships, some horizontal relationships, among other things, right? So I'm going to draw this line over here. I want to make sure that I'm picking up a tangent relationship to my circle. I'm going to utilize the escape key to back out of this. And then one thing I really like in 2018 that they added is the auto dimension tool. So with that, all you have to do is click on a sketch feature, and there's this auto dimension insert here. So I'm going to start dimensioning my sketch because we know that we want to have this to be fully defined. So this is utilizing the breadcrumbs as well. I don't have to keep ducking out of my sketch to grab the smart dimension tool or other tools to establish these dimensions when it's right there in the breadcrumbs, right? I'm going to utilize the control key here to grab these two lines and establish an angle between them, which I want to be 7 degrees. Now I have a fully defined sketch, right? Now what you're probably thinking is I should mirror these, and I am going to do that. Another way to go about this is the dynamic mirror entity. So just remember, if you do the dynamic, that you have to engage that before you actually start sketching. So you would just hit dynamic mirror entities, select the line. I'm going to utilize the mirror entities. For this, you could use the shortcut key if you have it already established in here. If you don't know how to customize the shortcut key, you can right-click on your command manager, go to Customize, and then under Shortcut Bars, this is where your shortcut key is housed for the different file types and sketches. So basically I could search through here, find that mirror entities button, and drop it on here if that's something that I want to use very frequently, right? I'm just going to grab it from my command manager. I'm going to select what I want to mirror, and I'm going to mirror about the center line. Another thing I want to point out is the D key. So the D key was introduced a few years ago, I believe in 2016, and what this does is it brings the confirmation corner directly to your mouse pointer. So I'm going to hit the green check here to check out of this feature. Right? And now I'm checked out. I'm still within the sketch, so once again I can utilize that D key, bring that confirmation corner directly to me, and check out of my sketch, opposed to having to go up to the corner every time and have this amount of mouse travel, right? So you're cutting down on this mouse travel every single time you do a feature or a sketch by utilizing that D key. So what's nice is that those come as defaults with the D key and the S key, and they're right next to each other, right? So S key for shortcuts, D key to accept. So you can just flip back and forth between those two. So now we need to create our extrude of this part, right? So we're going to utilize the contour select tool. So once again, I'm utilizing the right mouse button. I'm going to grab a couple contours here. I'm going to utilize the S key once again. I'm going to do an extrude, right? There's a couple other shortcut keys that you can grab here, or you can grab the instant 3D stuff. In this case, I want to use a mid-plane. If you hold down the M key, it'll also give you access to the mid-plane option. So I'm going to make this 40. Don't forget about the Enter key as well. So there's my preview. I'm going to hit the D key instead of going back up to here. Green check out of that. Now I want to create a sketch on my right plane. So I'm going to grab that. Now if you want to bring this normal to, I keep the normal to shortcut up here, but keep in mind you can also use Control 8. So if I do Control 8 or the space bar, of course, another step to bring that sketch normal to you. Control 8 is probably the quickest, or the normal to. I prefer to use either one of those. Probably switch back and forth between the two, right? So let's do another line. Shortcut key, S, right? I'm going to pick up my constraints as I go to make sure that I don't have to come back and establish those. Of course, if you miss one, I want to create an arc here. And if you didn't know, if you come back on your line, it'll allow you to create an arc directly off of that. So I'm picking up my constraints once again. I'm going to make sure that I establish my tangents, all my coincidence, close out that sketch. I want to add another center line here. Now I drew a center line. I'm going to make that construction. Okay, cool. Now what I want to do here is add another circle. So I'm going to utilize that S key once again. Utilize the auto insert dimension tool. We need to establish some dimensions for our arcs and our circle. So the circle's 10. Auto insert my arc dimension, which will be a radius of 10. And I need an angle between these two lines, utilizing the control key. Want that to be 2 degrees. I missed a constraint here, right? So I actually need this to be symmetric about my center line, which did not get picked up. So I'm going to make that symmetric. Now I want this to be lined up with my origin. So I'm going to grab my midpoint here and my origin, make that coincident. Now my sketch is fully defined. The trick and the challenge here to this part was these lines weren't straight, right? So if these were straight, you could have done this a different way, but because you needed to have this angle input here, it added a little bit of a challenge, right? There's a couple other ways you could have done this, but I'm showing this way. So I'm going to utilize the D key once again and check out of that, right? I have my sketch. So I'm going to grab that contour select tool again, which is a really great tool. You can either enact this from the right mouse click, or you can also enact it from the selection manager within the cut. So I'm going to do an extruded cut. So it's selecting these contours down here. It's telling you those. Now I want to make sure that I'm picking up this hole here, and I want to make sure that this is going to be through all both, and I'm going to flip the side to cut so it actually cuts the outer surface away. There we go. So that was a little bit tricky, making sure that you have the right contours selected and this hole picks up. Okay, cool. So we have our U shape. Now we need to add that boss part at the top, right? So we're going to do S key once again. We're going to do an extrude. It's asking for the plane. We could have pre-selected the plane. I'm going to do this plane. Control 8. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. I'm going to grab the circle tool. So S key once again. I'm going to draw 2 concentric circles. Keep in mind you can also use the mouse gestures for this if you prefer that. That's utilized by the holding down the right mouse button, and that will allow you to access some commands as well. So there's my circle. I'm going to auto insert some dimensions here. So I want this one to be 26 and this one to be 18. So now we have our circle, right? We're going to create an extrude. So I'm going to check out of this sketch. I have my extrude already pre-selected. That's not quite what I wanted here. The key here is to utilize an offset surface. So I'm going to utilize this offset plane. I'm going to grab a 67 millimeters. So it offsets it the distance off of my sketch plane 67. It's going in the opposite direction that I want, so I'm going to flip that direction. The other key here to control this model is to have a relationship established between this boss extrude and this extrude, which in this case I want to utilize something on the model to constrain that. So I'm going to use a vertex. I'm going to grab this vertex right here on this corner and establish that. That will keep my boss where I want it to be because I know that I'm going to have to make a change. So I want to make sure that everything is fully constrained here, right? So the 2 other things we need to do are cut this portion away and make a cut in the top. Now we could make another sketch here. We could do some convert entities, but keep in mind I already have that sketch created from before, right? So if I show that sketch, what I can do is utilize that contour select tool again. Grab this guy, grab that shortcut key, Extrude Cut, do a through all both, D key, check out of it, right? So there's my cut. The other thing I want to do is make a cut through all here. I need this boss to be have a hole in the center. So I'm going to utilize my breadcrumbs, do a sketch. I'm going to do a convert entities. I'm going to utilize that sketch. There we go. That's what we wanted. Now the blind or through all in this case, I don't really care. I'm just going to hit the D key and check out of it. Okay, so there's our completed part. All right. So now we need to add some fillets to this guy. And another thing I wanted to show you with the fillets was the selection manager. Very, very important for adding fillets. So instead of picking every single edge, right, we can grab our breadcrumbs, grab the fillet tool. I'm going to utilize actually the shortcut key, grab the fillet command, and then once I grab a edge, it gives me this selection tool or this selection manager here. So the key thing here with this is to look and see which edges it's actually selecting and knowing which edges you need to actually pick up, right? So in this case, I want to have connected 27 edges, I believe. You can do all. There's a variety of options in here, but just checking the feedback with the preview is the best way to get that. We'll grab that. We'll grab our radius from the window, make our update to our dimension, grab our D key once again, and check out. So there's our completed part, right? Not too bad, a few hiccups, but just imagine that you're doing this off of a drawing that you just looked at for a few minutes and you're on a timer, right? So another higher level of difficulty with that. But that's basically one way you can do it. So now let's take a look and see this second stage and what we would need to do. So I've already got this partially completed for time's sake, and I'm just going to kind of show you what I did here because there's a couple key features I really wanted to show. So if I roll this up here, Here's the bracket I had before. Now what I did was I rearranged some features, and then I brought that shell command up to the up a few levels here. So I'm actually shelling out the bracket without the boss. And then I add the boss, because now you can see I have this inner material here and this material that I need to cut away. And because I've already created those features, I can save some serious time here by just bringing those in after the boss was created. So now I have a straight through cut and this cut. The challenge here is this was not only a shell, it's to move this face of the U bracket with the boss along with it and keep everything together. And the best way to really do that is a move face. So this is a direct editing tool that a lot of people forget about sometimes. There's move face, delete face, replace face. So if I do a move face here, and I'll show you how I did this if I jump into this move face command. All this is I took a translate, I selected this bottom face, this U face here, this curved U face, and then I added the difference that was given on the drawing between the old height and the new height they gave. And in this case, it ended up being 8 millimeters. Did a blind 8 millimeters down, and then it moves that entire face and basically fixes or repairs that geometry instead of having gaps or issues here. And then what I did was I utilized that selection manager again. This was quite tricky with the selection manager because there is a lot of fillets that you need to pick up on this one. There is 62 fillet edges to pick up. So you really have to make sure that when you're going through the selection manager, you're picking up the correct edges. In this case, these inner ones were extremely challenging because it had to look exactly like this. And I believe the selection manager wasn't picking up every single edge here. So you actually had to go in there and select a few edges and make sure you got everything. And it also wanted to continually pick up these circle edges, which I did not want. So that's the completed phase 2, right? And now we need phase 3, which is with Simulation Express. And if you don't know about Simulation Express, it's a very simple product. It's free with all of SOLIDWORKS, Standard, Pro, and Premium. It's under Tools, Express Products, Simulation Express. It loads in a simulation. It's very limited with what you can do with it, but for this case, for what they're asking for, it's the perfect option, right? So basically, we need to make sure first that we have a material entered here, which we do. It was specified as plain carbon steel, and that material carries forward down here to our simulation study. We add a fixture. So these fixtures are specified by the Model Mania team, and they tell you add these 2 fixtures, right? So we've got that. We added a force here, and all this was 10,000 newtons in one direction upwards. The reason that Simulation Express works so good for this is because there's limited options. You can't do much here. All you can do is have basically a force in one direction. You can do a normal to, or you can do a selected direction, and that's about really all you can do with it. So that's all I needed was a 10,000 Newton force going straight up. I go next, tells me, hey, the material is assigned. That's great. We definitely need to have that material assigned. And then we hit run. It runs our simulation very quickly. You can see how fast that ran. Gives me some feedback on an animation. Asks you, does that, what's the correct animation that you expected? You say yes, it is. And it gives you this number right here, which is your final answer. So in this case, it was about 2.55, and that is the answer that they asked for. So you can submit that answer, and hopefully you're correct, and hopefully your time was under the specified time that they gave. So some takeaways and tips I wanted to go over after we looked at the example. Design intent. Obviously very important to Model Mania because of the phase 2 change you're going to have to perform. The negative or the downside is you don't know what the phase 2 change is, so you're going to have to just do the best you can, keep everything defined, keep everything constrained, and go for it, right? Use the shortcuts wherever possible, like the S key or mouse gestures. I showed both of those. I prefer the S key. And one thing with the mouse gestures, if you do like those, did you know they added the ability to have up to 12 mouse gestures in SOLIDWORKS 2018? So you can add 12 mouse gestures to every mouse gesture wheel for the different part file or the different files. Keep in mind to customize your S key as much as you want. Super simple to go to the Customize tab, add commands to that S key. Customize your mouse gesture wheel, of course, as well. Use that D key to bring the confirmation corner to your mouse and not the other way around. Utilize breadcrumbs wherever possible for starting sketches or accessing the fillet command or anything when you click on a feature, even the auto dimension insert, which I showed as well. Use the selection manager, great for things like fillets. Obviously, selecting individual edges is very time consuming. Don't forget about tools that utilize direct editing like delete face, move face, and replace face. Use the command search bar. This is great if you know the command name you're looking for. If you don't know, you probably have to look in the command manager or the drop downs. But I do say try and minimize digging through pull downs for commands, although it's sometimes unavoidable, right? You got to look for something that you don't use a lot. You're going to have to look for it. Use the escape key to exit a command as quick as you can. Now, obviously, I should state that if you want to apply these suggestions or tips to Model Mania, you won't be able to since you're given a computer that is pre-set up, so it's not your custom UI. What I'm referring to here is more of the ways to utilize these tools in your day-to-day at your own personalized machine, right? So an action for you guys, explore the SOLIDWORKS user interface, see what works for you, find where the commands are and how you want to access them or your preferred method to access them. The defaults are good, but I'm sure you can find ways to make them better and faster. Take some time up front to set up SOLIDWORKS for easier access to commands, shortcuts, and frequently used items. This will save you time and ultimately make designing in SOLIDWORKS faster and even easier. Now I challenge you to try this part or any part that has some level of difficulty and explore the different ways to access commands, see how fast you can complete the part. Consciously think about how to improve your speed and really be aware of how you're opening commands. Did you stick with the shortcut key or the mouse gestures? Or did you keep fishing through the command manager or drop-downs? With that, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with us. Hopefully you saw something that could benefit you and your process. Keep learning about SOLIDWORKS and exploring more features with us at Desai. I'm Jared Spaniel. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And if you have a technical issue, please reach out to our tech support team for assistance.